So you talked about your dad was negative, right? And your mom had left early. And the ability to think strategically and figure things out oftentimes has a little bit of a judgmental component to it, right? Where we say, okay, I hear that politician, that's all BS. I hear this marketer, that's BS. In the midst of all that background, that skill set, how have you remained so positive? Like you have such a positive upbeat. And I think about that at the dinners. You were always uber positive, even though it wasn't Pollyannic. I mean, it was so intentional because you could tell, you know what's going on, but you've chosen to be positive. Where did that come from?
I'm going to give you an answer that Jim Rohn would give.
Okay.
Somebody comes up to Jim and says, Jim, how do you stay so motivated?
Right.
You're always so motivated. And he says, well, I go to all these seminars. So how am I so positive? Because I continue to fuel my mind with what's positive.
Okay.
I continue to feed my mind the references of what's possible.
And that's important, you think?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because I am my father's child.
I think you could gravitate to
No doubt.
because you see the BS,
no doubt.
right? Yeah.
No doubt. Yes. Also because I do kind of see through a lot of that.
That's what I mean.
I could be very critical and
Right.
judgmental and see it
And
for
we've
what
had
it is.
those conversations in the past.
No doubt.
We both can kind of go there, but it doesn't serve us well, right? It doesn't serve me to be the smart guy that sees everything.
Right.
Versus, wow.
Right. So I have to continue to flush my mind with what's possible and what's hopeful and what's abundant and the progress of forward. And when I'm in groups, I'm trying to advance something. So advancement's positive. It's not negative.
Right.
Advancement's positive. So I'm always going to try to encourage the dialogue and the discussion and the brainstorming or the thinking in a positive direction, which is only going to be supported by what's positive, right? So, I use the analogy all the time that, our mind's like an empty glass and the world around you is very, very negative. It's very negative, particularly with sensational news media. And it's like pouring Diet Coke into your glass. And now all of a sudden your mind is dark and muddy and muddled. And so, of course, you can only see what's negative and you can only see that it's dangerous and you can only see what to be afraid of when you're looking through a mind that is been filled with what's dark. And so the only way to fix that, because you can't pour it out, is to flush it with clean, clear water, to flush it with ideas of inspiration, with positivity, with personal development, which is the reason why I would listen to Jim Rohn's Challenge to Succeed that you put together over and over and over again, to the point where I probably heard him tell his stories more than he told them, which means that I could tell his story in some cases better. I could be words ahead of him when he's retelling the story, right? And it wasn't that I was there to learn anything new. I'd heard it before.
Right.
I'd registered it, right? But it was just a flushing mechanism of my mind. Because no matter, you take a glass and you pour water into it and it'll flush, it'll end up clear.
Right.
But then you go back out in the world and Wolf Blitzer's on CNN in the airport and
Right.
Diet Coke's getting in your glass. And if you don't go back to flushing it, it'll end up dark and dirty again. And you'll start seeing, all the negativity and, all the sarcasm and all the fear and all the things to be, that are dangerous and so forth. So it's purposeful. You have to work at being positive.
Right.
And your mind will absorb whatever it is that you feed it. And that will end up becoming what it sees in the world around you. What you feed it is programming it what to look for. So you feed it negative, even if it's by accident. You got negative relatives, negative friends, negative, conversations, negative news, negative, television and so forth. It's going to start looking at the world
Right.
negatively. So you have to proactively flush. You have to proactively put what's positive and hopeful and abundant into your mind to flush that. And so it's never ending. It's like sweeping the floors. You can't sweep the floors once and call it done.
Right.
As soon as you put the broom away, dust starts falling.
Yeah.
You're going to have to come back and sweep again.
Right.
So that's the mind.
So talking about rinsing reminds me of hearing you talk about, you do these steps and then you rinse and repeat, right? You don't have to know 1,000 things. Your your focus on simplicity. Is any of that from a Jim Rohn influence, or do you think that's just naturally something that is your philosophy, or you've developed that? Like, keep it simple, what's the most important things, and then rinse and repeat versus trying to do 1,000 things.
I'd say two things to that. One is that it is the reason why I gravitated towards Jim.
Okay.
Is Jim made the complex simple. And this is the opposite of the way most gurus do it. They purposely make things more complex in order then to make you dependent upon them for the next answer.
Right.
And so the scientific breakthrough, the neurology of this and the NLP of that, and it's purposely complex so that you never completely grasp it, and you got to go back to them for further answers.
And it doesn't mean it's not true. It's just 80%.
Right.
These half a dozen make up 80% of your results.
And Jim did the opposite. I remember him saying, at the end of your talk, you don't want them to say, great speech, because you dazzled them with your brilliance. You want them to say, I think I can do that.
Right.
And that principle has guided what I do every single time. I don't want them to go, wow, how impressive he is, or how brilliant that was. I want them to go, I think I can do that. Yeah. My goal is to have you say, have it be explained and packaged so that it's so simple and it's so actionable clearly that you now feel empowered to be able to do it. So that is the first thing about what I learned from Jim is make things so that it is accessible, so that people are empowered by it, not overwhelmed and, deluged by it.
Right.
The second thing is what I learned from Richard Branson, and the opposite. So you talked about, at one point I wanted to, you look for models, right? Who do you want to be? And I was like, oh, Richard's awesome. Like, look at the guy. He said, long flowing locks, and he kite surfs with models. He's got his own private island. The guy's just, and he's
always happy,
right? You're like, I want to be Richard Branson. Then I got to know Richard, and Richard, with 400 companies, has at any one time 125 lawsuits pending that he's named in personally,
right?
Just by the sheer nature of how business works, right?
Right.
And Richard can throw stuff against the wall, and what sticks sticks, and what doesn't stick stick, and he's fine with that. He can navigate himself in complexity, and with 125 lawsuits, and not have it ruined his day or good time at all. I realized I'm not wired like that.
Yeah.
I would rather do a few things with excellence than a lot of things, even if it is at the cost of not being worth $4 billion, right? And so I realized that I'm more interested in the art, in the excellence of it, and how I feel about what I put out, than just putting out more for the sake of scale.
Right.
So he taught me what my nature was.
Right.
And my nature wasn't complexity, doing a lot, driving things for the purpose of just great scale. That my nature was a few things done with great quality, with great excellence, that I'm proud of, that I can keep my arms around, and I can maintain my cognitive, mental, emotional, psychological, psychology, because I can keep my arms around ensuring that it is excellent.
And you're very fastidious about that, and that's got to be a huge temptation. So, congrats to you for maintaining that. The more success you have, the more opportunities that flow your way. So again, we have a lot of history together. Back in 2006, 2007, you were helping me with my company doing consulting and really gave me phenomenal advice. And I think that was before then, I asked you to come into TSTN to run that company with Mark Sparks. And when we were putting that together, you and I, again, we'd been together for a long time, but just figuring out the logo, figuring out what we were going to do. There was such a perfectionism almost with how you saw things in such a pristine way, right? And so, and I have witnessed that really serving you well. You know, I talk about, and you're a phenomenal marketer. When you think about marketing, the number one principle, and I might have learned this from you, Darren, I think I inherently always did this, but the number one marketing principle is create a great product. Number two, have great customer service. You know, number three, be relational and consistent. You know, not figure out how you can do all these tactical things. Now, tactical things are important, right? But the core things are create something great. And I think more than anybody I know, that is your philosophy and your deep-seated belief. And that's how you've created what you've done.
Yeah.
You went at a slow pace. Like, again, people think they have to come out the door, but I've watched you build this company, and you were very patient and you did it right. You had the right rhythm. And then over time, it just starts to compound, right?
You know, you can always look back and go, wow, I'm so freaking smart. Look at all these brilliant things and decisions that I made. But I, you know, if I think, well, why am I that way? I think I'm that way because, you know, I've, like Steve Jobs, right? He was given up by his biological parents, and he always dealt with, am I worthy? Am I significant? His whole, I need to dent the universe, I need to do something important and profound, was overcoming that emotional issue of, do I matter? You know, am I important? You know, seeking significance. And I think that is part of my drive too. You know, having my mother walk out the door and you having to vie for love and attention from your father. And so this whole idea of, is this worthy? And I want to do whatever it takes to assure that what I put out is worthy, right? And to a point where it's overproduced. Like, right. It's more important to me that everything I put out, I can psychologically and emotionally be convinced it is excellent. And I won't put anything out if it's not excellent. And you would go like, oh, that's so principles. You're so patient. I think it's in response to this driving issue.
Right.
So a lot of times the people don't realize this, but most people's high functioning skills are rooted in their dysfunction.
Right.
Don't fight it, like, appreciate it. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that I've had this driving force to have to seek significance my whole life. Because I've had to seek significance, we're going to impact 1.5 billion people this year through our work. Because of the drive to be significant, to have a positive impact. Why do I want to have a positive impact? So that I feel worthy. Because I'm still driving from this childhood issue, basically. Right. And now I embrace it. Now it's like, yeah, this is great. It's fuel. You know, a lot of times your adversities are your advantage. Like, right. Stop condemning your adversities. They're your advantage, and embrace them and realize where it's coming from. Like, that's the real root of it. So, like, one of my principles is I will not put out a product unless I absolutely, in my heart of hearts, know that if you spend money for it, you will gain 10 to 1.
Right.
You will have a direct line of sight. For every dollar you give me, I know with the application of 10% of it, you'll get 10 times your investment. So I'll give you, for instance, we have I have my CEO forum, the High Performance Forum, and it's 12,500. And unquestionably, you can't be in the room an hour and not be able to turn that into a 6-figure return. And we do it for 2.5 days. Okay, I did an elite version of that, and it was $25,000 a year for 2 years. So you're spending $50,000.
Right.
And I knew, based on what it was that I was going to bring to them and the way that the whole thing was facilitated, unquestionably, it's going to be an increase of $500,000. I know, and it happened every time. We could quantify and measure it.
If you have the right people in the room.
The whole thing has to be right.
Right.
Right people, right facilitation, right environment, all that.
Right.
But then at the end of 2 years, I kill it. It's like, we're done. I want to end up, Jim Rohn also said, you want to end up here, not down here, right?
Crescendo, right?
Yep. Yeah. You want to end at the peak. Yep. So I would cut it off. And even they wanted to keep going. But the energy wasn't as, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, no. I decide when Elvis leaves the building, right?
Okay, right.
So But these guys are like, we'll pay $100,000 if you'll just put a group together. I'll pay, and it's like 10 times $1 million. I can't convince myself that I know that everybody in the room, I'm going to be able to put $1 million in their bank account. It's up to them,
Right.
and they want to pay just to have this experience.
It's a community of people too.
The community of
Great
people,
right?
and they'll be affected in ways that they might not be able to measure necessarily. But I don't want the burden.
Right.
I don't want the emotional, psychological burden that I place on myself. This is totally me.
Right.
That I got to produce a 10-to-1
Yeah.
in value. And again, I can package it by saying it's a commitment to excellence. And that's just who I am. I'm about quality. But the truth is that I'm making sure that I'm still worthy.
Right.
And what I put out is worth it. I'm still covering for my a potential imposter syndrome.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
And I'm not trying to defend that when I say what I'm about to say.
No, yeah.
No, but I think you also have an awareness of, what helps you sleep at night. And you
Right.
don't want to
You're
carry
exactly
other
right.
people's, because I do the same thing. Like and we did this with Jim Rohn International. I did a price where it was fair value, but at the same time, if it's on you if you don't take full advantage
Right.
of it. If you charge an extreme, then I think you do have a higher level of having to explain why.
Right.
You price
And
it
an
so-
expectation,
and you
an
wanna make-
unspoken expectation
Right.
From those that paid the money.
And I want to go back to the analogy talking about Stephen Jobs and things like that. So I think, again, having known you, conversations, you have always been on a search how to balance this ambition, this work ethic. So it's the awareness that makes it work. I love what you talked about. It's like, okay, you know who you are, you know why you do what you do, and you flow with it. But the awareness is what makes it work.
Yeah.
Because we know some people that haven't had the awareness because they didn't go search.
Right.
They didn't go dig. I've watched you do that. You've said, hey, I'm a workaholic. Hey, I'm going to spend 100 days this year not on a phone, not doing those type of things. But that doesn't mean you're going to stop doing
Right.
what you do. You've
Right.
learned to and I think awareness is a huge key to anything.
Yeah, absolutely. In my awareness to what I need to do is ambition is a double-edged sword.
Right.
It drives you to fulfill your purpose, as Jim would say, to see what all you can do with all you've been given, right? The aim of life is productivity. So it drives you, so it's positive. But it can also drive you out of your life.
Right.
It can have you pursuing too many projects. It can have you starting too many businesses. It can have you saying yes to too many opportunities. And then you're beholden to those. Now you're beholden to those meetings or those shareholders or those quarterly review meetings or those lawsuits or those clients. You know what I'm saying? So
Exactly.
My greatest challenge these days is reining in my ambition. Because the ambition is a runaway horse, and you've just got to hold the reins on it so that I am still seeking growth and progress, but I don't grow it out of my own sort of life, the lifestyle I want to lead, and the mental burdens that I do or don't want to be obligated to. And so it's that never-ending sort of fight to, okay, yes, we want to grow, we want to become better, but we don't want it to run away, then we become beholden. So it's like a lot of people seek freedom.
Right.
And then they create all this wealth, and then all of a sudden they have financial freedom, and then they keep going, and they're the least free person they know. Their pool boy
Right.
is freer than they are because they're beholden to this albatross that their ambition has built.
Right.
And now they are a prisoner in obligations.
Well, we talked about Paul J. Meyer. He had someone at his house every day doing something.
Yeah.
He had 40 cars, right, in the warehouse. I had a house at one time, vineyard, pond, though you've been there.
Yeah.
We had someone there every day. You got 6 air conditioning units. One's breaking, something's happening every day.
Yeah.
I don't want that.
Right.
That's not freedom to me.
Exactly.